Hey, how you doing? Let's do it to it. Okay, let me get a drink real quick and we'll get started. Okay, let's go to our studies. Okay, we're entering a whole nother session. It's called various. Various. Oops. U.S. And it states states of. Yikes. Thank you for bearing with me. Chess. What am I missing here? CON. Oops, yeah, it's not R. That's the problem. CIOUSNESS. There we go. So there's various states of consciousness of chess. Yep. Perfect. Okay. And this is actually from this is a game. So one of the players is an NN, which is not rated, I don't think. And then this is one of Jeremy Silman's students. There we go. Had to get that was kind of a little longer of a setup. Thank you for your patience on that. Okay, this is we're gonna read here. Just a quick little session summary, because this is the beginning of a new section, not chapter. Once we learn how the pieces move, the next stage of chess is to develop our mental state. Because what's going to happen is when you start playing after you learn how to do the pieces, you're going to have to go through, I like to call a learning curve, unless you get to a teacher and you're willing to listen and not have to go down this. It's called the learning curve of losing queens, getting forked, hanging pieces, and basically just bad play for a while. It just happens when you're first starting out. Unless if you get a teacher and you hunker down, which means you do the chess cruncher model and you study, then you can actually progress without having to go through the bumps and bruises of chess losses and blunders and all that. So that's kind of what he talked about. And there's the psychology of it is the stages you go through. Like white played b3, black played e5. And this is kind of a side game. White's a 1100, so the other player's like 1200, but they didn't put the name in because I don't think he got the permission to put the player's name in. So he just did NN, not named. G3, D5, Bishop G2, Knight F6, D3, Bishop C5, And then he played this move that's not a very good move. This is considered dubious. It's a dubious move because it really doesn't have any point to the play. So the play is not good. White is the first to, as he says, crack under the mental pressure. He notices the possibility of knight to g4, knight g4, and became so worried about that knight jumping there around his king that he wasted a tempo to prevent it. Instead, he should have gone about his business with knight to d3. Knight d3 would have been a better move. When knight g and then castles. Takes care of the problem doing something positive that he wanted to do anyways, which was castles. And of course you see if this gets played, then this actually benefits white, because for a rook he got two minor pieces. White's more developed, which what that means is white's going to be able to launch an attack pretty fast, and if black castles, then a pawn just falls off the board of the end of the world, as I like to call it. If knight takes, then bishop takes, and he's up just so much material. He's actually up two pieces for a rook, not the other way around. So this is actually potentially almost losing for black. But this is worrying about nothing move. Also, let me see here. If g, see castles, knight f2, rook takes, bishop takes, and then king takes. Yep. But even with a pawn through the pawn count, will tell us that material is even. The fact is that white is the one who would be happy with the exchange in this situation. In the middle game, two minor pieces usually prove stronger than a rook and a pawn. Since the rook won't be doing much until a file is opened, and since the extra pawn most likely won't make a huge impact on the early stage of the game, keep in mind that a rook is nice, but two minor pieces is like a humongous, it's like a rook, if you think of it as a QB, and two linebackers coming after you. That's basically what it is. So right here, bishop b6, not a terrible move, but quite unnecessary. Is this really the best black has? Doesn't he have something more some more important things to do with his move? Doesn't black have something more important to do with his move? What move would he play if white had no threat? What does which he doesn't? The answer is castle, queenside, kingside, exclam. This would have been a much better move because white wasted a move, safety your king, and then just come crushing down on your opponent. Castle always asks, what move would I like to play? Then do your best to make it work. That's what Jeremy Silva says. Ask, what move do I want to play, and do your best to make it work. So with this waste of time for black, knight f3 was played. Now e5 is threatened, and that one tiny threat grabbed black's attention, making him do something he probably didn't want to do, which was d4, mistake. This is a mistake. Of course, black had if black had castled, then he would have defended e5 with the uncomfortable rook e8. However, since that's not possible, the simple simplest and most positive way to guard the pawn was with queen to e7. So back here, if castle is here, then the knight comes, rook to e8 is what Jeremy Silman's talking about. But in that scenario, instead of d4, the best continuation for a defense is actually e7. Our queen to d6 is a good move too. Not fearing the idea after rook here, when because of bishop c5, and if the bishops come off the board, then the pawn is still defended once and attacked once, so it's still okay. So what's wrong with d4? Basically, that's what Jeremy Silman's asking. What's wrong with it? The first thing is psychological. Black felt compelled to do something he didn't particularly wish to do. Other than that, the move opens the h1 to a8 diagonal for white's light square bishop, gives light square bishop, giving white's knight access to c4, knight to c4, because when this pawn was here, this access point was gone from white. But now that this move is there, white can actually access it via a3 to c4, and then there's an outpost. Also, this freed up the light squared bishop. This diagonal, this whole diagonal, is freed up as well. So basically what Jeremy Silman is saying, this, and then this diagonal is open for him as well. The a2 to it opens h1, this right here. It opens this for the light square bishop. There we go. Knight c4 square, and blocks black's dark square bishop. So this has so many negative ramifications. C3, not horrible, but white wasn't aware of the perk, this move, and subsequently captured on d4 will give his opponent sorry, let me reread that. Not horrible, but white isn't aware of the perks. This move, which perks this move, and sequentially captures on d4 will give his opponent. This will be discussed over the next few moves. So don't. Jeremy Silman just threw that in there that white's going to want to capture here and try to gain a pawn, but in reality, this doesn't really give white any counterplay. The best continuation would have been this, and then if castles, knight into c4, and then that could be defended there, and then if you wanted to, white can then just castle, and then at the right moment, even this square is open for the knight, so you could actually in theory reroute a knight in there if you wanted to. But c3 is kind of a waste of time. Black castles, c takes d, knight takes d. Quite reasonable though. Black wasn't aware that knight takes d4 opens the e file, e4 file for the rook, which would allow him to generate pressure along the e2 pawn after rook e8. Beginning players often have serious trouble getting their rooks into the game during its stages, in the early stages. However, once they realize that clearing a pawn off a file gives their rook a highway to travel on, life becomes much easier. This subject is deeper explored in our part 3 on rooks that we already went over priorly. So knight takes, wisely white avoids this mistaking move here. This is actually a mistake, this move, because rook e8 at this point, and the game's almost lost when white opened lines to his own king intentionally. This is actually a better move. Still not grasping the significance of the pawn on d4. I prefer, instead of bishop takes, that's what was played, he prefers e takes d4, then knight d2, c6, castles, and then rook e8. And when rook e2 is a permanent target, it's important to get all your pieces into play and create long-term targets whenever possible. So this is a long-term target that's going to be a problem. They took there, queen c2, and then c5, which before looking at the game together, my student gave me a copy of it with full annotation. I was proud of him when I saw the notes to the 11th move. This is where I broke under pressure. At the time, I was thinking I have to protect the c-pawn in case I need to move my queen. So he actually broke under pressure on that move. And admitting when you make a kind of move that is a nonsense move, or a move that doesn't really do anything, no move, you're on your way of maturing as a chess player. And it's kind of hard to admit when you don't make the best move, but it's better to do that and learn from it than and otherwise you're going to make the same mistake again, and that's not a good thing. Looking at it now, I see that c5 blocked my bishop in case I want to get out of the way. And I can't move my b-pawn because it's pinned. I should have considered just c6, which protects my c-pawn with my queen from protects my c-pawn from white's queen, and my b-pawn from the g3. So this is what he's talking about here. This move protects the pawn from the queen, and also protects the pawn from the g pawn here. So this bishop right here, this bishop right here wants to attack here, and this queen right here wants to attack there, but they can't. And with one move, black handles that whole problem, all the problem, with just c6. Excuse me, 1 second. Excuse me. Let me get a drink there. I think I swallowed wrong there. That happens sometimes when you get focused on something so much. We have discussed I can't in our first lesson. So his noting is so quickly. Let's see. Let me reread that. We've discussed I can't in our first lesson. So his noting it so quickly was a very positive thing. The first step to slowly but surely ironing the problem out is to recognize it, like what we just said. And of course, he's right about c6, though white would be okay with knight to c after this here. if c6, knight c3 would be adequate to basically keep an even edge. At this point, castles for white, rook e8 for black, and then knight d2. Bishop e6, and then c3, which this was again a mistake by white. White didn't notice that this gave the d pawn. This gave up the d pawn. White did not notice that. Bishop takes, queen takes, and then queen d3, which wins a pawn. Rook a8. That covers the knight and prepares for a potential discovery attack with knight c3. Okay, a big moment. Now black will react to. Let's see. He has to look at the rook on d1 staring at the queen. The queen went to g6. Sending the queen off to the side of the board. This isn't terrible, but it wouldn't play for but it wasn't played for the right reason. His reason was run for dear life, basically run for your life. I would have much happier if he looked at that rook in the eyes and played rook here. Rook a to d8 exclam. Because there's this little, yes, this looks like, oh yay, I win a queen. Yeah, but guess what? You get 2 rooks for the queen. And this is enough compensation that even after this here, you could play bishop takes, pawn takes, and then rook f8 to d8, and then you're going to be infiltrating in via here. And that would be really, this is a powerhouse move. This does lose the pawn here, but you have to always realize that each move has a drawback. Like that move, this is now white's in big trouble if you thought about this here. Now there's a check here, and you have to be careful of this. There's actually really no threat. This is at least a draw, or maybe even winning for black. Because you can even, if you wanted to, play this move. Now you're threatening that there, and so the bishop would have to actually retreat back at this point, and then e4 would come, and that's basically game, set, and match at this point. Because you really, this is covered, so then you could actually play there, and the knight can't be taken, because if the knight were taken, then it's checkmate. So that's why he was saying he should have stared down the opponent and played that move, and wham, he would have had a serious advantage at that point. Increase the tension and asking who is facing down whom after that move. And so after this, knight e4 would have to be played here. Not the best, but it will illustrate why black didn't have to fear the rook. If bishop takes the pawn, then bishop takes h3. Excuse me. Knight e4 was best, though white had the plus with queen takes, and then takes there. and material. It'd be an interesting situation there. After this, queen takes, rook takes, oops, knight takes first, g takes, rook takes, and then rook takes. And then king h2, rook e d8, like what we talked about, would also be playable. White's doomed because of the threat of rook d2, one of the rooks coming to d2. 1 second. I have to get a drink. Alright. There we go. So it's kind of the player would be doomed at this point. Let's see, other good moves would be, let me see. You could play queen a6, which is an interesting continuation, or queen b5, holding on to his material plus. But the psychological power of rook a to d8 is the move that would put a huge grin on the face of one's teacher. So this here, bishop takes b8, rook a d8. Quite good, but soft, or a quiet move. In that, black hasn't really taken stock of what he was going on in the position, basically what he's going on in the position, demonstrated by his 18th move. Let's see here, rook a d8, and then bishop g2 would have been played, and then c4. Getting rid of the c weakness and creating a weakness on b3 would be a reasonable idea, ridding himself of the weakness while simultaneously giving a weak point to your opponent is very important and somewhat of an advantage. So if this were taken, and we'll say here, here, this now is a type of weakness. I don't think I would trade here. You now potentially could play queen here, go after that, and then you're attacking the rook and you're putting the question. That is a playable move. g4. So you could play that type of a move. And then just bring back. Now you've weakened also the king side. So, alright. Bishop g. Oh, so he did play it. Bishop g2. And then rook b8, which was played in the game. That's a mistake by black. Black noticed the idea of rook c5 to c4 and rushed to make use of it. Naturally, he needed to see it a move before on move basically 17. The rook is going to move, but where would it perform a useful function? That's what we have to look at. I don't want to just move it somewhere. Basically, I don't want to just move it somewhere. I want to move it where it works with other pieces and serves a particular purpose. As it turns out, queen to g6 combined with rook a to d8 was okay if seen in context of building a kingside pressure with queen to right back here. After this and here, queen h5 would have been a better move. 1 second. Let me get another drink. We're getting rid of that cough a little bit. So this would have been an exclam continuation. This is what Jeremy Sim was talking about. Then we can see that white's h3 pawn weakened his king structure, and black is logically trying to take advantage of it. Here's are some illustrated lines that might occur after queen h5. White can try king to h2, or he could try g4. So 1 second, I will be right back. I will put this on here. I'll be right back. Hold on. And then we'll get right back into it. I'll be right back. Okay, we'll finish up this game here because I know you'd like to finish it up, and we'll see what happens here. And then we'll get back to ours after the game's over. It's over now. Okay, let's get back into ours now. Okay, we're gonna look at king to h2. So king h2, e4 is a good move here. If they want to draw a knight to king there, knight f6, h2, and then this is a draw if you're wanting to draw. Like if you just need a draw to win the title, you could do that if you get a stronger opponent. Rook c1, knight g5, g4, bishop g4 is also an interesting continuation with rook d5. Our rook d5 is also, this is an interesting move here. Let me get that move, and then this one's interesting as well. Also, surprisingly, rook e2 is also, or e3 is also an interesting move. Sorry about that. Hold on. I know I missed one. It deserves consideration as well. So king g1, knight e5, king h2. This is a blunder. White needs to give up the exchange by playing this move here. Rook takes c5, exclam. This gives an exchange up. Knight c, bishop takes, queen takes c5, knight takes e4. Compensation with white would still have some problems after white would still have some problems after not b5. It's b4. That was a mouse slip on my part there. So after rook c1, knight there, and then back here, rook takes d2 is actually an exclam move. Queen takes, knight check there, king h1, because of course you see a bishop takes, then everything's going to break loose at that point. You have here, and then there's really no way now to stop checkmate from happening here. So h1. Bishop takes h3. g3. g4. Queen to g6. Oops. Yeah, if bishop takes, then mate. If bishop takes, then check, checkmate. And if the rook tries to guard here, you could actually just retreat the bishop back. And when the bishop blocks, then queen takes as mate. Or you can even, if you wanted to go, kinda, that's check. King takes. There. Yeah, why put yourself in that situation? So, bishop takes is actually a mistake, so the only move to win is that. And then that leads to mate. So let's take a look at g4 now. Okay, g4. Queen g6. Mission accomplished. White's king is now weakened, weaker than ever. Knight to c4. Rook takes. Rook takes. Bishop takes. Pawn takes. And then h5. G takes h. Queen takes h. And the vulnerability of White's king will make it hard for him to generate serious winning chances. Like rook d2, queen to f5, which is an interesting continuation that could actually come down the line. e4 was also playable here, which is also an interesting continuation too. It's interesting, but you always got to be thinking, is that what I want to do? And then if White plays rook d6 here, that's a dubious move. Really doesn't do much. Knight e4, rook d1, knight g5, queen b5, rook e6. Now we're getting all the pieces involved. Shows how quickly storm clouds can appear over White's king. All this analysis is very complex and advanced, but it's worth checking out so you can get a feel how to repel or basically pull apart the king pawn structure. The king pawn structure can easily give the other side counterplay. So if you if basically you move the king too far, king pawns too far up the board, you're going to give your opponent tremendous counter play and counter strikes. And that's kind of what we're learning here, is that you have to be careful when you move your pawns in front of your king if you castle. Josh Waiskins and Bruce Bonafini, and they call it giving air. It makes air around your king, which allows your opponent to take advantage of all that space, and the king then doesn't have any soldiers to be his guard anymore, and that would be sad, because then he'd go down in flames, and we would not want to see that happen. Knight to f3 was actually a mistake again on the part of White. It's important to recognize pawn weaknesses, and once you do, to bring pieces to bear on them. Thus, queen to a3 is actually a better, it hits a7, and it also hits c5 at the same point. Let's see here. Also, rook c1 hits the c5 and stops this move from ever being played, to basically remove the weakness from black's pawn, the pawn weakness. Should be a natural choice that are full in lines with the imbalances, fully in line with the imbalances. That's what I mean. So after knight to f3, black blundered with bishop to d5, which is a big mistake here. This was a double question mark blunder. So the best, actually the winning combination, let me see here. Oh, e4 is actually a better move, which would gain him the kind of kingside counterplay we saw in the notes on move 18. This is move 19. This would give black the counter play that they would need. I can hear many of you saying, I am much stronger than these players. I don't make mistakes like that. And that, you know what? We all say that. But guess what? He said, really? You don't? He says, I beg to differ. Everyone under master suffers from some type of these players' mistakes. So we all, you know what? You can't say that you don't. Until you reach master status, you will make mistakes like this. It's sad. I know you're probably saying you'll probably be watching this on our recording, saying, "Really, Chess Cruncher TV says that I'm gonna make mistakes like that?" You know, I don't make mistakes like that. We all do. Under time pressure, you make the most silliest moves, and it could end up being just that little bit that changes it from a win from you to a draw. And it all happens. We have to put aside our pride, our ego, and as most of us have, our need to be right all the time, so that we can actually progress deeper in chess to become a master. Masters didn't get to be masters, chess players, by not making mistakes like this. What they did is they said to themselves, self, I need to find out what's causing me that, and what's causing me to make these mistakes, and then they'll fix them. They'll find out, I'm lacking maybe endgame studies. I need to work on my endgame. I'm lacking tactical patterns. I need to work on those. I'm under pressure. I have a problem. I need to work on that. Or, certain things they just work on. And they're not, and then one thing that they do that we have to be able to do, it is hard for most players. They go over the games they lost and find out what mental thought did they play that made them lose. Was it just that they missed a subtle move that their opponent made, or did they just give into, I have to move that way to stop my opponent? So just one of those things, some advice for you. We gain him an advantage. Okay, let's see here. Differ, though. Let me see. Everyone under master suffers from the same type as these two players do, though in increasingly more smaller from the ones that we're looking at right now. The higher ladders you go up, it's the smaller mistakes that you make. The games we just looked at show. Sorry, the game we just looked at shows how we're by how the players are moved about. And like that's what the Lord said, that you don't want to be like a double-minded idea. James said that it's unstable in all their ways. When you start doing, rather than doing your idea, you start reacting to your opponent. You're basically doing a double-minded idea, and it's an unstable type of mindset. So you can't have that type of a mindset and basically be a champion. You have to have heart. And the Bible, I mean, what the Lord always says too is this: that you know what, um, we're like, life is like wind. It comes and it goes. It's also like a vapor. It's there for a moment and then gone. Same thing with move sequences. When you have an opportunity to play c4 like this, pawn c4, and you miss that opportunity is gone like a vapor. It's over. You can't get that back. What that means is Josh even had to come to grips with right after you make a move that is not good, like this move here that the player moved. No doubt about it, Black did see this. No doubt about it. Right after that, Black probably did see e4. It's somehow, Josh says, that our mind actually gets rebooted again. The way we look at the board, it automatically we get a new perspective because the move's done and we're like, why didn't I see that? It's because you were too close to the move. So what he started to do when he got to a position and he knew there was something there that he should play, like e4, this e4 move, Josh would get up, walk around, grab some water, something to reset his perspective. And that really helped him to become a champion. So that may help you so that you don't make these mistakes that cost you the game. Maybe just get up if you if you know there's a position that needs to be played but you just can't see it. Get up, walk around. Don't just play a move for playing a move's sake. Okay, let's see how we're doing for time here. Perfect. I think because we're entering another section, we'll finish this one out here. Okay. Okay, the game we just saw. Okay. Alright, we have explored this fear of threats in previous chapters, mental breakdown, and macho chess. And though we will continue to see examples of this syndrome, as I like to call it, because it does happen with players. If you don't get rid of it, it becomes part of you. Our habit, we'll call it habit. Here, it's time to take a serious look at 3 other physical habits that are bad. The lack of practice is one of them, because a lot of players. This is sad. I know you may say, I'm playing games online or at tournaments to get better as a chess player. That's true, but unless you that's to some truths. Unless you though practice, what that means is get a book out, maybe go over some tactics, or work on, if you're having a problem in the opening but you're really good in tactics, get an opening book, just work on a little bit, practice the opening you want to learn. Blitz games are great and everything, but my teacher told me that it's more of a gut instinct. Oh, I haven't got to look at that book. It is interesting. Yeah, I did. I have heard of it. It's supposed to be a really good book. Yeah, it's on Chessbulls. Yeah, I have. I've seen the intro to it. It looks really good for tactical understanding, but I'm not sure. I don't have it in on Chessbulls for me, so I can't really give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral or whatever. Um, but it looks interesting. I'll just give it an interesting, like on chess. I'll give it a exclam question mark thing. It looks interesting, and maybe someday I'll purchase it and go over it because it looks fun. It looks like a fun tactical book to go over. So yeah, practice is one that we have to work on. That's mainly problem with a lot of chess players is they like to play. I love to play chess too, but you know what? You can only get as strong as much as you study, as I like to say, and that's just the fact. If you don't practice, you can't get perfect, and that's even this. We even say practice makes perfect. There you go. And then then there's one session lazy moves or soft moves. Those are moves we got to see in a women's world champion that the lady was in full. I think her name was Pam, if I'm not mistaken. In the last video we did, she had an advantage over her person, the player she was facing, her opponent, and what happened was she just some reason we get comfortable. I like to call it comfortable. We get that we have an advantage and we think, yes, we finally got an advantage over a higher rated opponent, which we shouldn't look at the ratings because ratings don't really indicate what a player's strength is, because you may be facing a 1200 who soon, maybe in a couple years, becomes a master. So never look at the rating. And you may be facing a 2100 who's just having a bad tournament. So, but what happens is she lost out on a couple really strong opportunities to exercise some really powerful move combinations, and it was that Jeremy Silman calls those moves that are missed. That when you play just a move for playing sake, lazy are soft moves. And then one thing that really has plagued, and we'll end on this, does plague a lot of opponents, rather than practice, rather than lazy move or soft moves, is they don't pay attention sometimes. Paying attention to detail is huge in chess, because it may look like your opponent did yeah, there you go, that's right. It may be huge. Yeah, that's right. And paying attention, the detail is huge, because what happens is your opponent may make a move that looks kind of like outlandish. But if you don't pay attention to kind of what the idea is, it may be like we even watched a Josh game that Josh was playing against a really strong up and coming young player, and when he was young as well. So, and what happened was he missed this one move. They played Queen F2, which was a really, really not a good move. It hung a rook, but it shocked Josh so much because he didn't see the move, that he didn't see the rook that the queen could just take, and the game would basically be game, set, and match. And that's the attention to detail that he's talking about, or paying attention, how Jeremy Silman presents it. And so we have to always pay attention to the small changes in the position. Like some games are won because of just a tiny mishap of not paying attention. Okay. And we're going to call it on that. Well, I wanted to thank you all for participating, logging on, and taking your time to learn along with me how to reassess your chess 4th edition. That was a little bit longer of a game, more detail. We had a lot more talking that we had to go through, because what happens once you reach a certain plateau, you have to always keep pushing forward. And that's one thing that we have to remember. That's what Bruce Lee's motto is based on. That you have to take what you know and be able to apply it and be willing to do something with it. And that's why what we talked about is choices and attention to detail. That's why the attention to detail of when to choices of the Lord Jesus Christ, to either receive Him as Lord and Savior of your life or not, is a very critical point in a person's decision. You have to decide what you're going to do one day with the Lord Jesus Christ. But what we do for our learning is the Team Chess Cruncher motto of hanging up your coats, hanging up your hats, sitting down when most won't. Team Chess Cruncher does, and that makes all the difference. And as Wesley so says, serve the Lord Jesus. As I say, God bless, and I'll see you next time on Chess Cruncher TV. Keep pushing forward, having fun. Remember, study is important as much as playing. Okay, and remember what Hannibal Smith said. We always end with this. Even inside of a random position, there's always a plan. And when you find it, and you get to play it and do a good move, you get to say, I love it when a plan comes together. Okay, 2 thumbs up, hoorah, be blessed, and I will see you tomorrow, and we'll pick up on our next section inside of the main section. Bye-bye, team. Hoorah.